So I made a mistake. It really bummed me out actually. I had been filming all my reactions to the parts of Oathbringer as I was reading them, and then as I was trying to move over some of the clips from one of my SD cards, I did something wrong and accidentally corrupted all of the clips on that card. So I lost basically all of part 1, all of part 2, and like half of part 3 of like what I've been saying. So that was a real bummer. But I am just gonna make the best of it, gonna keep going forward, and I took some notes. I reminded myself of a couple of just kind of what each part had kind of focused on, and remembered the things that I had really wanted to talk about. So we're just going to recap it all here in one sitting, and I just finished part 4. So in case you are new here, I'm a huge Brandon Sanderson fan. I love the Stormlight Archive. I think it's my favorite series by him, and I'm so excited for Wind and Truth to come out this December. And I am rereading the first 4 books. This is the first time I've reread any of the books in the series, and it has been so great catching up on things, reminding myself of all these little details that I had forgotten. I forgot a lot, so I'm having the best time rereading this. I am on Oathbringer, and I will also say I had a goal in the beginning to read these books like 1 per month leading up to December. So I read The Way of Kings pretty much all in August, read Words of Radiance basically all in September, took like 1 or 2 extra days, and I meant to read Oathbringer just in October, and I read about half of it in October. We're now like halfway through November and I'm still reading it, but look at how close I am to the end. Part 5 is all that's left, and it's not too long, so we'll get there. November was supposed to be for Rhythm of War, but it's okay. I think it's okay if I go into December a little bit. I'll be a little bit behind probably on getting Wind of Truth read super fast, but it's okay. It's technically a Christmas present for my husband anyway, so I'll just be ready to read it probably around Christmas. It'll be fine. So, welcome to the vlog. One thing that I remember saying about part 1 is that it is really hard reading all these flashbacks from Dalinar. He's the one that we get like all of his flashbacks throughout this whole book, and I remember how bad it gets, but I was not anticipating a lot of the early flashbacks being so hard to read, because he's such a different person in those flashbacks. Like, he really is so awful. He's really a tough person to sympathize with and like, and it's hard seeing him back then. And now that I'm all the way in part 4, that I just finished part 4, where he just barely remembered everything. I mean, almost everything. He's finally remembered like the majority of what he did, what he was. And he keeps thinking like, I'm not a good person. I just tried to hide the bad away. And so I became like a better person because I'd like forgotten all these bad things, but I'm really not a good person. I'm a hypocrite. And it's killing him to like realize like what he was too, which I think does show that he really is a better person than he thinks he is, because he isn't happy with who he was before. If he was really the same person, I don't think he would feel quite the same way. He would be trying to find a way to get back to the thrill. You know, speaking of Dalinar, another thing that I really liked about him in part 1 is that he is trying so hard to like do things the right way. He's trying to create this coalition of all these different leaders, and he's trying so hard to just get somebody to listen to him, to give him the time of day. And it's not really working at all. No one believes him. They all think that he's just trying to conquer everybody, because that's what the Alethi do. And he's just trying so hard to do things the right way. He doesn't want to conquer everybody, but just nobody believes him. And he keeps thinking like, this would be so much easier if I could just go in with an army. He just knows he can't do that, and he doesn't even truly entertain the idea, even though he feels so out of his depth. And I love that he's just so committed to doing things the right way, even though they're so much harder for him. Another thing that I really love with this section is how Kaladin, he is kind of on reconnaissance a bit right now. He went to go make sure that his family was okay, and now he's trying to scope out where the Parshendi are, what they're doing, now that they've basically all turned into Voidbringers. And he finds just some really normal Parshendi who just, they have their families, they just want to be free, they're really angry at the humans for enslaving them, and they're really just people. And he helps them, he comes to know them and care for them, and he keeps asking himself these hard questions like, are we really justified in fighting this war against them when like they just want to be free? Like, and he's asking himself really hard questions, really good questions, and I love just that he's coming to see them in such a compassionate way, you know. It's just, and that's part of who Kaladin is, and he's great. Shallan did a lot of stuff in this part too. She did awesome stuff getting rid of that unmade who was making Yurthuru so creepy, crazy. I really enjoyed the interludes after part 1, of course, like I always do. I especially loved the one with Alista. She's this ardent she's just trying to find a quiet corner to read her steamy romance novel. So funny. And the ardents are like translating the dawn chant, and that was just a fun little interlude. So now let's shift to part 2. Yasna came back right at the tail end of part 1, which was such a great ending to that. And as a result, she's just she's being Yasna. She's just stepping back into what she was doing, into her research, helping out with leadership things. She's kind of just back to herself. I mean, not that she was never herself, but she's just back to doing Yasna things. And Shallan is struggling with this because now Shallan is like the ward again, and instead of being the Knight Radiant who was, you know, figuring things out on her own, and now she's the student again, and it's a hard adjustment for her, and so she's really like regressing in a way where she suddenly doesn't know what she wants. She doesn't really know who she is. She doesn't like who she is. She's trying to figure out how to be more of Veil, how to be more of Radiant, like all these things. She's really struggling, and it's hard to see. And for a while I was like, why can't you just be satisfied? Like, why can't you just figure out what you want? Come on. And then I was like, realizing I keep forgetting how young Shallan is. She's only like 17-ish right now. Maybe 18. Like, she's barely an adult. She's really young. I just realized, like, I'm 10 years older than her. Like, when I first started reading this series, I was about her same age, and so I think I probably related to her just a little bit more because, I mean, I was 10 years younger. I keep having to remind myself, like, okay, I've gotta, in a sense, be kind of forgiving because she really is so young, and she has had a really sheltered life in a lot of ways, so it really shouldn't be that big of a surprise that she's floundering quite a bit. It's hard to see, but I'm understanding where she's coming from when I remind myself she really is so young. It's crazy. Oh, and speaking of Yasna, I love that we get some of her POVs in this part. Like, I always love a good Yasna POV. She's a fun character. Like, she's so capable and just is so confident. Like, there's so much to love about Yasna. She's great. I also really love, okay, the best thing about part 2 is that you get all these different POVs from different Bridge 4 characters, and I love Bridge 4! You could probably tell if you watched my other vlogs. And so I loved getting to just have different chapters from different people's perspectives. My favorite one was the one from Rock, because you realize just what a glue he is to Bridge 4, because like all these different people come to him at different times, you know, struggling with this, struggling with that, needing, you know, his encouragement and his humor and his compassion. Like, Rock is just so good. And he really like just helps kind of everybody in their own way, and just he keeps them together. And then when his family gets there, oh, it's the best. And I totally forgot, Rock hints in that chapter that he has some sort of secret that he's keeping, and I don't remember that being revealed in Rhythm of War necessarily, so I'm curious to either remember that when it comes up again or to find out what's up with that later. But speaking of Bridge 4, one thing that has been just so hard to see is all the hints and moments of what Teft is doing and the path that he's going down. It's so hard. I think especially, like, it was already hard seeing Teft and the path that he went down in Rhythm of War, but I'd already forgotten so much about just these different individuals from Bridge 4 when I read Rhythm of War. And so now that I'm like reading these books consecutively, and these people, like I feel like I know them so well now, and it's like I love Teft so much. I've been with him through so much. It's so hard seeing him struggle, and I'm not ready for how Teft's storyline plays out. I'm not ready. And the interludes for this part were so good. I totally forgot about Kaza. I think it's Kaza is how you would say it. She's this soul caster who is turning into smoke, and it's crazy. She finds a certain island in Iemia, and I just realized, like, wow, that is a really good setup for Dawn Shard coming up, and it made me realize that maybe I need to reread that book too. So we'll see if that happens. I don't know if I will have time to read Dawn Shard or not. Dawn Shard was good. I remember really enjoying it when I read it. Okay, and Taravangian's interlude. Oh my goodness. So this was the one where, like, we've already seen an interlude, I think, in the last book, in Words of Radiance, where he had one day where he was like really kind of like slow, but very compassionate. And now we're having a day where he's brilliant. He's really smart, and he's kind of heartless too. And it's just so fun getting the other end of the spectrum. This is one of the chapters that I remembered the most about Taravangian, that just really like stuck with me and made me go like, whoa. This is crazy. Seeing Taravangian behind the scenes, like, it's ominous, and it's intriguing and crazy and cool. Now part 3, you'll see some snippets of me come in a little bit later, but for now, just to recap some things that I missed saying before. I think I started out by saying that, like, Oathbringer is just really heavy. There's a lot of heavy stuff in Oathbringer, and not that Way of Kings and Words of Radiance were necessarily light, but Oathbringer really like starts to lay it on you. It's dealing with some heavy questions, some really difficult like interpersonal issues that people have. Like, it's tough stuff. One of the toughest things is seeing Shallan and how she really, I mean, she's so insecure. She really doesn't think of herself as being good enough, as being worthy of love. Like, she really just has so little love for herself. And it's hard to see, and I understand where she's coming from, because for a long time I really had similar insecurities as a teenager. I didn't see myself as being worthy of love either, and I wasn't confident. And you know, if I could have become somebody else, I might have found that really attractive too, you know? So it's really hard to see, but I kind of get it. And there's a part where Wit comes along, and he's so, he's there for her. And I loved that part where he was telling her, like, you are enough and you can be yourself. It's okay. That was really great. But I will say there was a part right before that where Wit and Shallan came together, and they were just kind of chatting while Shallan was trying to kind of, you know, figure out a plan to get to the Oathgate in Kholinar. And Wit and Shallan are just going back and forth, saying like the wittiest comment they can, just trying to be so clever, and they're being kind of snarky. And like, they just come across as so arrogant. Like so, and they're so annoying. Like when Shalana's by herself being witty, I'm usually like, cool. Like sometimes she's actually pretty clever, and you know, even if she's not, it's just kind of like cute how hard she's trying, you know. And so most of the time she doesn't really annoy me on her own when she's trying to be witty. And Wit on his own when he's trying to be witty, sometimes I'm like, okay, come on, like rolling my eyes a little bit. But at the same time, it's like, it's kind of funny how just insulting he is, you know? And like, I've kind of learned like that's just him. And you just kind of live with it. And you know, like when they're separate, I can handle the wittiness. When they come together to be witty in a conversation, I'm like, either get a room or get away from each other. Like, I can't handle them together. There was a whole page, I remember, a whole page of them just like almost exclusively dialogue of them back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I was like, I'm not usually negative in these vlogs. This is like basically the only like negative thing besides like I'm hurting and pain, but the pain is like a good pain. That was bad pain. That was like, really. Also in this part, I really loved seeing Kaladin change. And he's got more work to do, but I just love that you've seen throughout the whole books, he is really biased. He has been hurt. The Light Eyes have not been good to him, and he is very prejudiced against them. And suddenly he's thrown into a situation where everybody thinks he's a Light Eyes, and he's with this light-eyed wall guard, and they're all just, you know, treating him like a normal person. And they are, he finds they're just like normal people. He feels very like Bridge 4 at home kind of companionship. And he's like, but they're light-eyed. Like, what? And he's realizing like, they are people too. And not every Light Eyes is bad. And he's realizing just how biased he is. And it's fun seeing that change in perspective for him. I'm excited for the progress he's making. In this part is also when Kaladin, Adolin, Shallan, and Elhokar, and Azure and the friends they make along the way, they storm the palace to try to get to the Oath Gate. And things do not go very well. And there's a really hard part. It ripped out my heart the first time it happened. I was a little bit more like keeping myself emotionally at a distance when I read it this time, but it was still like, it was still hard. When Elhokar, he starts to say the words, he really starts to get there, and it just kills you because he's trying so hard. He really has the best intentions. He's really a good person. He just, oh, it's so hard seeing him. Like, you want him to succeed, and then he just loses his chance because Moash. That's a scene that like I will remember for a long time. Also, oh my gosh, just remembering that like his child was there in the room with him. Okay, the last thing that I'll say before we jump to my little snippets where I think I talk more about Dalinar and some other things, is that I am having a really fun time noticing some Easter eggs that I hadn't really noticed before, and like I understand better like who Azure is and Zahel, and like the color idioms that they use are just so funny. Because I know who they are and what book they come from, and so it's been fun just like piecing things together better. Now let's jump to past me talking about part 3, and then we'll jump back to me here talking about part 4. Anyway, I think I'll just say I love that we're seeing Dalinar progress so much as like a leader and a negotiator. I love how he is suddenly getting a look at different cultures and realizing how much there is to respect from them and how much value that their perspective brings, and that he can, you know, have something to gain by thinking like the Thalens for certain things and thinking like the Azish for certain things. You know, to do everything the Alethi way is not always so beneficial, you know, and that it really can help to have like a broader perspective. And that's just such a great, I love that kind of lesson. I loved it when Risen was learning kind of a similar thing. And I just, my heart aches for him that he is suddenly like bulldozed by this memory returning. But I'm really, really excited for future parts where things are gonna really, really come together and be painful but worth it. Excited for him. And I'm so sorry that the background is so loud. My kids are playing upstairs and you can probably hear it, so sorry about that. But anyway, the interludes were also great. I always love the interludes and how they give us these really different perspectives. We get like Mraize's washerwoman and he's like, did you get all the aether out? And she's like, but what? Really great. That really snobby Light Eyes who is captured by the Herdasians, and we get a little bit of an introduction to the Herdasian general, who's really their king. And of course we get a few looks at Venli, and she's attracted her own like radiant spren, and it's really exciting. Anyway, I'm excited for part 4 and more heavy things to come. Okay, I actually forgot to say in my last little film bit that I forgot that a bunch of characters got pulled into Shadesmar in this book, and that happened at the end of part 3, and I am so excited. I mean, I know if I went to Shadesmar in real life, I would probably not be very happy. It's really hard to survive, but it's really fun to read about these characters traveling and surviving in Shadesmar. So I'm really excited to spend some time there. And I'm also so excited that Adolin is finally meeting the spren of his sword. I love the arc that Adolin goes on in this series. Like, especially what happens in Rhythm of War. I'm just so excited that we're setting up stuff for that. Like, it's really one of my favorite parts. So I'm really, really excited about this, and so looking forward to the rest of part 4. So part 4 was great, and there were a lot of POVs in this one, which was really great. We needed them. One thing that I remember especially was kind of having a little bit of a trade-off between Navani and Dalinar's POVs, because Dalinar, at this point, he's remembered the awful things that he did in his past, which was really, really hard to read about. I knew it would be. And he's, you know, going in his downward spiral where he's, you know, do I turn to drink? Do I turn to the thrill? How am I going to get through this? I'm a horrible person. I'm a hypocrite. You know, all these things. And he's not really functioning and taking care of all of his coalition meeting things. And Navani really has to like step up. And that's hard for her in some ways. And of course she's there for her husband, and she's willing to you know, do what she needs to support him. But I really remember this moment where she was just a little bit bitter. Like, why does he get to go be sad? Because like, I'm worried about my son who might be dead. And she kind of recognizes that it's not really fair for either of them, really, because, you know, she wants to grieve. She wishes she could kind of like fall apart and take a minute, but she also knows that like Dalinar is struggling, and so she wants to like help him pick up the pieces. And I get that when you're not always at your best, and your partner is not always at their best, and you know, sometimes you just have to, you know, lift the other one up even when you're not at your best, and sometimes they have to do the same for you. Anyway, I'm coming to really love Dalinar and Avani's relationship, because I'm really seeing quite a beauty to their romance that I don't think I appreciated before. Yes, the journey through Shadesmar has been really fun. I really love seeing Adolin step up in a lot of ways here. Like, he's realizing in some ways, yes, he's a very important, capable guy. In a lot of ways, he's also not the center of the universe, and he's like, ooh, okay, I will be humbled. But he does it so gracefully. And then he's there for Shallan when she's falling apart, and I love how there's just no judgment from him when he's hearing her talk about like, I can be this person for you, I can be this person for you, maybe I should just come up with somebody new, who do you want me to be? And he's like, it's you. But he's not like oh my goodness, just be yourself. Oh my gosh, you're so crazy to try to become all these different people. Like, and he doesn't necessarily understand fully, I don't think, like what she's going through, but he's not being judgmental to her about it. He's just letting her be and listening. And Adolin is so good. He's such a good guy. Anyway, we just ended with Dalinar's coalition pretty much falling apart because some big news came, like that reveal about who the real original Voidbringers were. That was like really mind-blowing to me the first time I read that. And of course, like nobody trusts Dalinar now, and so it's sad seeing that fall apart, but I know good things are coming. And man, it is so interesting watching Taravangian, the way he interacts with Dalinar, and he's like, he's so sorry because he likes Dalinar, but he's so determined to follow his diagram. It's so interesting. Anyway, the interludes were great. I'm so glad that in the interludes we finally got back to Risen. I really like her as a character, so I'm excited that we got back to her. It was a pretty scary situation that she found herself in, and I love how resourceful she was, even though she thought that she really couldn't do a lot. Like she really did some heroic things to get out of a dangerous situation. I had to hop on again real quick and say I forgot to mention in part 4 that one thing that I loved so much was seeing Szeth train with the Skybreakers. Like, it's just so fun seeing like an actual like order of Radiance and see their organization and learn more about how they work and how they progress people through the oaths and just the ideals, and that was a really fun part. All right, I did it. I finished Oathbringer and it was great, of course. Big surprise. Part 5 is kind of interesting in its structure because, I mean, I feel like there's not a lot of chapters in part 5 overall. I think there is significantly fewer chapters in part 5 than the other parts, not just because the whole part 5 is definitely shorter than a lot of the other parts, but also each chapter is broken up into so many different scenes, and it's just constantly switching back and forth between all these different characters because there's a lot going on in part 5. We have all the events leading right up to the battle for Thaylen City, where everything is kind of climaxing, where it seems like all hope is lost, and then everything starts going down. So, and I think the structure does, for the most part, work really well actually, because it is really fun to see all these different people doing these really cool things at the same time, and you just have so many characters to keep track of, and it's kind of a last battle feel, even though it's not the last battle. It's that kind of like epicness. But I do think that there were some scenes, little snippets of people that really could have been combined with like the previous snippet from them. There were just a couple times where I was like, did this really need to be split up? Really? Because that's a really short snippet. But I also understand that that's a really big like project to kind of tackle and figure out where all those little like scenes and bits should go to make everything like cohesive. And I think Sanderson was really trying to make everybody's like sense of doom and we're going to lose like progress at the same point and kind of come to that like low at the same point, and then like the kind of revelation of like where like everything changes like the same for everybody, so that then they could all like progress out of that at the same kind of rate. Total respect for how the scenes were divided up, but I do think it could have been a little stronger with a couple little changes. It's fine, it's fine. Overall, it was so intense. I forgot how epic the end of Oathbringer is, because Kaladin, Adolin, and Shallan, they're trapped in Shadesmar, and the moment when Maya like attacks one of the fused, because Adolin is about to like be killed, and the Spren jumps on the fused back, and oh, it's so satisfying to see that she like feels something. And then later in the book, when like she tells him her name, and he's like, Maya, okay, let's do this. And he's just still talking to her, and he can like just barely sense like what she's feeling. Adolin gives his sword to somebody else who has full shard plate and is like, hey, you're gonna do better. I don't have my plate. You need a sword. Just, and he says, Maya, stay with him for now. And he feels this like resigned agreement. And I love that you just get the sense that she would really rather stay with Adolin. Like, she has respect for Adolin at the very least. but she agrees, like, yeah, this is a better use of my abilities. And I just love that. You can tell that she likes him. It's so good. It makes me so excited for what's coming in Rhythm of War, and I really, really hope that we see an awesome resolution to that arc in Wind and Truth, because it's like one of my favorite arcs really in this series. It's been so satisfying to see Adolin just slowly but surely gain the trust of the dead spren of his sword. Oh, there were just so many moments. How do I talk about them all? Teft, the moment when he finally says the words. I'd forgotten that particular moment happened, and oh, it was so good. Oh, and the moment when Kaladin finds Scar and Drehi, and he finds them with Elokar's son. It's like such a relief, but also so like, you know, they've been through so much and you just like hurt for them. Of course, love seeing Yasna be a total boss with her soul casting. She's amazing. Loved seeing Dalinar create perpendicularity, like so epic. And of course the moment where he's like, you cannot have my pain. Oh, and the way he accepts himself, like he acknowledges what he did and he's able to forgive himself for it and realize, like, you know, I've fallen really far, but I need to stand back up and be better. And just there's just so much like grace in that, and it's beautiful. Oh, also very exciting to see Fenli's turn of events, how she like becomes a Knight Radiant. I think I almost completely forgot everything that happened to her in Oathbringer by the time that I read Rhythm of War for the first time, so I'm really glad that I'm like finally going into Rhythm of War with like the really fresh, like, okay, I see how it all happened. Oh, Lift and Seth working together. Gold. Like, Lift is just so funny and like kind of flippant, and Seth is so like serious and like honor bound, you know, and it's just so funny seeing them together, and just the way that Lift kind of handles like all her little jobs that she's doing. But I also love that she truly has this sense of like what's right, the fact that she came back to help Dalinar. There was a moment where she's standing with him and she's like, so it's just us two, huh, against all of that? And he was like, yeah. She was like, okay. One thing that I think is actually really interesting in Oathbringer is that Kaladin, the whole time, he is progressing, he's growing, he's learning, he's overcoming some biases a little bit, but by the end of the book, he doesn't end up swearing a new ideal, and he comes really, really close to saying some more words, but he doesn't quite say them, and he's overwhelmed, and he ends up needing somebody else to come and save him. And you know, and even then after that, there's like even more of a battle, and he fights Amaram and finally like defeats him. Well, he doesn't even end up defeating Amaram, like he still ends up getting saved by Rock. And I just think it's really interesting that he doesn't end up saying any words in this book, but there's still such a sense of him having made some really good progress. And I also think it's kind of satisfying in a way, because it can get really almost like predictable, like once you realize, okay, the knights have like so many ideals they have to swear to, you know, keep progressing and gain more powers, so you kind of can guess, oh, in this book I bet, you know, somebody's gonna say more words. And the fact that he just doesn't quite get there, and just like it's okay, it's kind of a refreshing like way to shake up the plot, you know? Going back to Dalinar for a second, now I'm just jumping around just as much as the book was. I remember absolutely loving his decision to learn how to read and write at the end of the book, and I'm still just a huge fan of that choice that he makes. I think it's a really interesting just kind of play on perspectives and culture, just and like even just the remark that Dalinar makes, like, we took the shard blades from the woman, but they took literacy from us. And I think they really actually got the better deal. Like, they have more power, really. It's very interesting. I do think there is a huge power in literacy, for sure. Agree. Oh, I'm also just so happy that Shallan chooses Adolin at the end of this. And I remember reading it the first time and feeling like, yes, that was the right decision for Shallan to make. It really was. It's really resonated with me, just why she truly chose him, and it's because she realized how much he like sees her and loves like her for who she is. And she's been having such an identity crisis like this whole series, not really sure who she wants to be and not really loving herself, and to find somebody who truly sees her and loves her and is like there for her in a really like healthy way. And so I love that she chooses to be with him because of that. She really values that she's seen, and I think that's just such a great way to show that that's the right relationship for her. Okay, and I have to say the epilogue with Wit, I totally forgot that he actually picks up a spren at the end of this book, and it was a really fun little moment to be like, oh yeah, that's when that happened. Really fun to see it. Anyway, I am so excited to get onto Rhythm of War. I'm just having the best time with this reread. It's been so great just being totally immersed in this world. I keep trying to like sneak in another book on the side, like an audiobook or an ebook on my phone when I'm not like lugging around these chunkers, and I just don't really want to be reading anything else right now. I think I am gonna squeeze in a little book here in a second, but really I've been having the best time with these books and just love being immersed in this world, love following these characters and just rooting for them and seeing them fail and get back up and everything in between. I'm gonna go start reading Rhythm of War, and I hope you guys are all having fun rereading or catching up with the details of Stormlight Archive too. I am so stoked for the climax of Rhythm of War because there's some epic stuff coming. I'm so excited. There we go. Journey before destination.